Good morning on this Sunday, March 20th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The gloves come off in the race for Georgia governor as all the candidates hit the campaign trail. And Georgia's GOP chairman comes under fire from members of his own party for his tweets about Russia and Ukraine. Also, Atlanta says farewell to former Mayor Sam Massell. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Democrat Stacey Abrams made campaign stops across Georgia this week, calling incumbent Brian Kemp inept and lazy. But the Republican fired back, giving us a taste of what's to come in the months ahead.
My name is Stacey Abrams, and I intend to be the next governor of the great state of Georgia.
During an appearance at Guardian Works on her One Georgia tour, Stacey Abrams renewed her promise to expand Medicaid.
What changed was that COVID hit this state. But what didn't change was that we have a broken public health care system and an incompetent governor refusing to fix it.
If she was your governor, we'd be one COVID variant away from lockdowns. Your economy, your schools, your churches, and on, and we cannot let that happen.
Governor Brian Kemp made a campaign stop in Pike County as his main Republican rival, David Perdue, worked the crowd at a Troup County GOP meeting and got a fundraising boost from former President Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. But Kemp maintains only he can defeat Stacey Abrams.
There's only one person in the governor's race that can beat Stacey Abrams, and that's the person that's already beat her, and that's me.
I started organizations to help with vaccine hesitancy. I started organizations to make sure we were protecting the right to vote. I started organizations to work with our farmers. I did the work, and now I want the job.
All right, we're going to get right to it. Theron, Stacey Abrams didn't mention David Perdue at all, but obviously went after the governor. What do you think about this strategy?
Well, it says two things to me. It says that I think that she wants that rematch, and probably she feels that that's something that she can perform well in, and she knows Governor Kemp very well because she's run against him. I think the second thing is that they both, because, you know, as you mentioned in your segment, Governor Kemp didn't mention David Perdue. They're already making this a two-person race in a general. But I think what she did very effectively, Lori, is that she really showed the people of Georgia sort of two approaches to this deadly pandemic that we're still experiencing. Yes, we've kind of turned the curve a little bit. We're not out of the woods totally yet. But I think it comes down to competency regarding the issue of how do you handle deadly pandemic, how do you handle crisis in this state. Now, the Kemp people are going to say we kept the economy open. Look at where we are, right? I'm sure Phil and Martha, that's going to be a part of their points. But I think what she's also saying is that she hasn't stopped working since she lost the governor's race. She paid off all these medical bills. And look at where she's actually taking her campaign. She's in Colbert, Georgia. She's in West Georgia. She's in Atlanta. And so this tour that she's on, I think, is going to be very effective, because one of the things that we know that once the session is over, Governor Kemp is going to be able to spend more time on the road, and once he's signing bills, but also I think that she now knows that she's got to turn it up a notch.
Phil?
Well, not only turn it up a notch, but she's got to moderate from a lot of her radical positions. I mean, back when she ran for governor last time, she wanted to destroy the carving at Stone Mountain, and she wanted to put all of these radicals in office, and then she declared that the state is racist because she lost the election, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, she's trying to tone it down, but I think that there's a wave that's going on. We've talked about this on the show now. Biden's popularity is in the tank in Georgia and elsewhere. Warnock is struggling because of that, and I think Stacey Abrams is going to struggle because of this backlash against Democrats and their radical policies.
Does it make a difference what's happening across the country? Does it matter in Georgia?
It does matter in Georgia to a degree, but expanding Medicaid and making sure that all Georgians, particularly those who have the impact of long COVID symptoms, is not a radical agenda. It is something the people of the state overwhelmingly want. And the fact that she kicked her campaign off in front of a shuttered hospital, because 8 Georgia hospitals have closed in the last 10 years under Republican governors, it's not a radical agenda to want people to have health care.
And to that point, Martha, let me ask you this, because there are Republican states who expanded Medicare or Medicaid under Obamacare, and they have not gone bankrupt. So is this an issue that Republicans really should get a handle on, so that Democrats don't always have to come after them on health care?
Well, rural hospitals have closed in those states too. Okay, if you take a look at those states, there is a problem with delivery of medicine in rural areas across the country, and I don't deny that. But the problem problem I've got with how Stacey Abrams kicked off her campaign is she is not a happy warrior. She's a very unhappy warrior, and if Governor Kemp had called Stacey Abrams lazy, I think we would be having a very different conversation today. That is not the terminology, that is not the professionalism and kind of terminology that you would expect from somebody like Stacey Abrams to go to the point of lazy and inept when talking about a sitting governor. Maybe inept you could debate because you don't agree with his policies, but lazy is a personal attack, and it's a personal attack that couldn't be returned because people would be calling it something else.
Phil, before we go on to the U.S. Senate race, I want to ask you, what do you think it's going to take for David Perdue to get some momentum? Do you think it's going to take Donald Trump coming to Georgia?
It will. Donald Trump still holds the allegiance of a large number of Republicans in the May 24th primary. There was a big fundraiser for Perdue at Mar-a-Lago just this past Wednesday. I think he raised over $600,000. Perdue has put in some money himself. The PACs will kick in. Purdue's TV is going to kick in. There'll probably be 2 Trump rallies here in the state. So that'll be interesting to see over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks what the polling numbers are.
All right, well, let's move on to the U.S. Senate race, where it's also getting nasty. On the Republican side, Agriculture Commissioner Gary Black went after Herschel Walker in an attack ad that focused on Walker's allegations of domestic violence. Martha, it was quite an ad.
It really was, and it's not surprising. It's certainly going to be the thing that had to be said probably in the primary, and I know that these 3 candidates, Kelvin King, Latham Sadler, and Gary Black, there's been some debate about how hard are they going to go against Herschel, because do they want to be the guy that tears down Herschel Walker, or do they want to be the guy that wins on policy? But I think Kelvin King had a really interesting statement about that, where he said, you know, this is not about autographs and taking selfies. This is about the right policies for America. Now, again, as we all said last week, you know, Herschel Walker doesn't really have anything to gain by debating his opponents, so we'll see how this all plays out.
Theron, I mean, we expect this strategy maybe from Democrats, but, you know, Republicans here are kind of eating their young, right? Like, what kind of strategy would Senator Warnock use against a Herschel Walker?
Well, you know, the old Republican Party in Georgia, Laura, you were right. They wouldn't attack each other. I've said this on the show. A lot of times they would get in a private room, disagree privately, and then come out in a united front. But since Donald Trump has become the president of the United States, he has become the most disruptive Republican we've seen in our modern day history. And so therein lies that this new climate that we're under, that is, you know, it's no shortage of attacks on the Republican side. And I said this in an article that I was quoted in. Yes, you got to talk about some of the mental illness challenges that Herschel Walker has had, but you got to be very careful because it's a slippery slope, because it can backfire. But the one thing that I think that you're going to see is, and we were talking about Kelvin, we've been talking about Latham, who we all know on the show, that, hey, and Gary Black, where are you guys? What are you going to do? But here's the difference, Lori. The ad was bad. I mean, when I got it, I sent it to you. People sent it to me. But do they have the money to amplify it? And I think that's where Herschel Walker, if he continues to raise the money, if these guys want to maybe force him to a runoff or knock his points down, if they don't raise the money to amplify the attacks, whether they're just or not, then I think it's going to be very hard to beat him in a primary.
Phil, and then Melita.
Well, I don't see a problem sometimes with being a disruptor like Donald Trump was. He beat 17 establishment Republicans, and that told you something right there. He was listening to people on key issues. And I think Herschel Walker is listening to people. I think that, yeah, he doesn't have to debate right now. I agree with both Martha and Theron on that.
I think he should debate.
But I think he will have to down the road.
Correct.
I do agree with that. But no, I think that it was a low blow that Gary Black did. I was surprised at that. You know, when someone is trying to rehabilitate themselves and they've conquered their demons, whether it's alcohol or drugs or mental issues, I think we ought to praise somebody that has rehabilitated themselves. And I think it's dirty. Talk about the issues.
And he's addressed those issues in a book as well.
That's right.
So, Melita.
But Herschel continues to make stumbles when he attempts to talk about current issues. And it's sad to see a football hero like Herschel Walker having been manipulated into a race that he's somewhat unprepared to handle. Bless his Heisman Trophy.
Well, and one quickly, I know I'm going to disagree a little bit about President Trump being, you know, the worst we've seen in a long time. But what I would say is what led up to that, I mean, you had President Obama, who is a terrific person, call Republicans bitter clingers. You had Hillary Clinton say they were a basket of deplorables. So the momentum towards this kind of negative stuff was coming. He was the culmination, no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think he was.
But the momentum coming to it was on all sides leading up to it.
Well, I do have to push back a little bit on Melita. No one manipulated Herschel Walker. If you know him or have talked to him, he is a genuine patriotic person who's concerned about his country. There's a lot of Democrats that are concerned about their country, although we disagree with each other. So I think that, Herschel has core values. He's articulating them. He may not be debating other people, and you may not like that. That's fine. But to say he's manipulated, I mean, Donald Trump has been his friend for a long time. Trump encouraged him, and I don't see that as manipulation.
All right, we got to leave it there, guys. Coming up, crossover day raises for legislators, voting law changes, and a redo on medical marijuana. Just some of the issues we'll discuss coming up.
The Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Before we get to crossover day, Theron, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to what was said in the previous block about Herschel.
Thank you, Lori. And what Martha said about Donald Trump. So I think the difference is, Martha, and I respectfully disagree with you, is that President Obama and former Secretary of State and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton never said the thing that Trump said. You got to remember, this man said deplorable things about women. He was caught on tape. He went after our foreign allies. He talked about John McCain, who was a war hero. He made all these very negative comments about African countries, saying that they were bringing diseases over here. So my point is that if you want to sort of go back in history and point out certain things that President Obama said, it doesn't compare to what President Trump said. And then the last thing is this. If you ask any Republican, and two Republicans on this panel now, the one person that is causing all of this dissension, if you just look at the root cause of any fighting within the Republican Party and GOP in Georgia, it's all with Donald Trump.
It's not the Republican establishment that has betrayed Republicans over the years?
But then the second thing about Herschel, look, we gotta really put this out here, and a lot of my friends responded to this when I said this on the podcast earlier, and I agree with Melita. Anyone should run, but we do know that this man has some challenges, right? And we all knew that going in. And so the point about manipulation is that I don't think anyone has really sat him down and really gone through some of the challenges and some of the things that he's going to be attacked on.
Oh,
and
I think they have. He's being prepped.
Yeah, but I just think
Poorly.
that as a person who reveres the football player who grew up liking him, I do think that there are some things that are going to come out about his personal life, his acts, that are going to be very embarrassing to him and his family.
And we'll talk about them when they come up. Crossover day under the Gold Dome this week, several issues to discuss. Melita, more changes to Georgia's voting law, even though Republicans said earlier this year that they really weren't interested.
Yes, and some of those changes are legitimately, quote, cleaning up the bill, but some of the others impact voters in a way that restricts voting, and those were bad. There's a lot of cleanup to be done on many of the bills that were recently passed on both sides. The Senate sent over what amounts to a wheelbarrow full of bad bills for the House to either bury in committee or repair. The House sent over a few bills that might need the same sort of treatment. So I did an e-blast on Friday about the session remains to be winnowing out the wheat from the chaff in the bills that were passed on crossover day.
Well, Martha, two interesting measures for legislators, pay raises, and something that I was surprised about, 4-year terms for state senators.
Look, I support the pay raises, and I support the 4-year terms for state senators, because really what we've got is a whole body that gets reelected every 2 years, and make it a little more like the federal system, although it's not working that well, the federal system right now, but in general, the idea of having a little bit longer there. So I think that in both of those cases, those are positive movements. Now, again, you got to remember it's one side, not the other one yet. There's a lot of work. A lot of work has to be done, but it was an amazingly calm crossover day because so much of the stuff had already been passed. The big issues had been passed. So it was a very different feel to crossover day, I thought. Anyway.
Well, Phil, let me ask you this, because although Georgia passed a law years ago that would mean some growers would get licenses for medical marijuana marijuana. The whole process is just an absolute mess. The House and Senate are trying to fix it with two very different bills. Where do they go from here?
Well, I agree with you. That's some of the poorest legislation that I've seen done in years.
And not transparent at all.
No transparency. It set up a commission whose members, I'm sure they're all fine people, they have no idea what this industry is about or what the requirements are to get a license for growing and producing and getting the cannabis oil to patients. Let's not forget that there are people that have been waiting for years in Georgia with critical illnesses where they need this oil and they can't get it. So it's been a total betrayal of these people. And yes, they have two different versions now. I think they're going to get it together, and I think we'll finally get this oil out to the patients that need it.
I hope they don't just start over, because that would be even more delays. So, well, Theron, let me ask you this. This week, the chairman of Georgia's Republican Party, David Schaefer, came under fire for a series of tweets, even members of his own party accusing him of spreading Russian propaganda. Some are calling for his censure. What is your take on these tweets?
This is bad. I mean, again, we're talking about a GOP in Georgia right now that is going through a lot of chaotic moments, and this is another one. And, you know, when we heard about this earlier in the week, it was sort of a slow rollout of some of the Republicans criticizing him. Now, as time get on and we tape on Friday, you've had more come out. But to basically go after President Biden on policy issues, he can disagree or agree about how we're dealing with the issue in Ukraine. But to support a dictator that not only was at war with people in his own country, but now is invading Ukraine. And we were talking about it before the show, the bombings, people getting dead bodies left in front of their yards. To basically to associate yourself with this foreign dictator, this war criminal, and to be the chair of the Republican Party in Georgia, that really, really looks bad for the Republicans.
Phil.
Why don't we explain to the viewers what the tweet is and what we're talking about, and what is this UN resolution which was sponsored by the Russian dictatorship? It was a condemnation of Nazism and bigotry and all this. And I have to think back when I was in high school at the Model United Nations. I actually represented the Soviet Union. I knew all of their propaganda lines. They're always against fascism and capitalism and imperialism and colonialism. And I can see both sides of this. Everybody's opposed to Nazism and bigotry, but it was a Russian attempt to jab at Ukraine, who they're calling Nazis, and of course that's a lie. And that's why their pretext of invading Ukraine is we're trying to fight Nazism, and that's what all of this is about.
But are you saying that David Schaefer's support of their false resolution is appropriate for the leader of the Georgia Republican Party?
The United States government over the years has opposed this type of communist Russian propaganda, whatever it is. Everybody is opposed to Nazism. The point of that resolution, and that's what Schaefer was trying to point out, is to jab at Ukraine. Are you in favor of that?
Martha, real quick.
Yeah, my problem with David Schaefer is he appears to support candidates in primaries, and that's not what a Georgia GOP chairman should do.
All right. We'll leave it there. Coming up, several bombshells in the Atlanta City Hall corruption trial underway at the federal courthouse. We'll discuss straight ahead.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
More bombshells in the trial of Pastor Mitzi Bickers, who is a political consultant who worked at Atlanta City Hall. She's accused of manipulating contractors into paying her in exchange for city work. One of those contractors testified he delivered $100,000 in a laptop bag to Bickers' home. Martha, lots to unravel here.
Look, I don't think we're going to know everything until we get to the end of all of this, but it's shocking. It's not what we want to see at City Hall, but it is what the problems is that this is what happens a lot of times in local governments because you're so close to the money. I don't want to say encourages things, but it's easier.
Tempting.
It's more tempting because you're right there. I used to use the analogy, you're right there where the money comes in down the hall, and so it's not hard to try to get some of it.
Melita, this is a trial that has been delayed for quite a while because of COVID.
Well, and the delay is what makes it so rich that Bill White has been trying to use this trial to revive Buckhead City. You know, this trial is about behavior between 2010 and 2014 during the Kasim Reed administration. It has nothing to do with Mayor Andre Dickens. And for Bill White, given how he left the city of Atlanta to try and use this trial while to gin up support for Buckhead City is just ridiculous beyond the pale.
All right, I want to move on because the state announced this week the members of the 4 committees formed to address the concerns of the critics of the massive Rivian plant to be built about an hour east of Atlanta. Theron, is this a step in the right direction?
Yes, and it needs to be publicized, and I think that the sooner the better that they can meet with the residents in this area. That will be actually good for the state, but also good for the residents. But as I learn more and more about this facility, Lori, I mean, we're talking about electric vehicles, which is a growing trend in Georgia. I mean, more and more people are buying electric vehicles, and you have Rivian, who are going to bring, countless amount of jobs to this area, which we need. And so ultimately, I think that the job part of it and the creation of the jobs and being for, and the fact that they chose to build in Georgia, and people like Georgia Power and others doing a wonderful job of installing electric chargers all across the state to make sure that people don't have this range anxiety that we heard a lot about across the state. I think it's a really good thing.
Phil, step in the right direction by forming these committees.
It is a step in the right direction, but I think that people are not so much concerned about the electric vehicles. You're making some good points there. That's the wave of the future. But right now they're interested in the impact on that 4-county area, and that's where I think that they need to step up. We've talked about this on the program before. What are the impact on schools? You've got thousands of new people coming in. What's the impact on the healthcare system? That should have been explained earlier. I think it's being explained now, and that's why these panels are doing what they're doing.
All right, well, Atlanta lost a giant this week. Former Atlanta Mayor Sam Massell. It's really hard to mention Buckhead without thinking of Sam Massell. Melita.
Well, I loved the tribute that Rabbi Berg gave during the funeral service, calling him a man of the people who wasn't afraid to leave behind the desk. And I also appreciated the fact that, fresh on the heels of celebrating his own 90th birthday, former Mayor Andrew Young was there to give tribute to him as a bridge builder for the city of Atlanta.
Martha.
During his term as mayor, we had one of those really big ice storms in Atlanta, okay? And one of my earliest memories of Sam Massell was him being behind a pickup truck. They were giving out dry ice to residents of Atlanta so that everything in the refrigerator and freezer wouldn't go bad. To your point about being a person of the people, that's the picture that I remember of Sam Massell.
Theron?
Yeah, I think, the thing that we keep hearing about former Mayor Sam Massell is, of course, he was like the mayor of Buckhead, but if you really look at what he did around the creation of MARTA and really taking some very tough criticism from his own party and some of his friends, and how he worked across the aisle. And more importantly, let's just call it what it was, Lori. In his defeat against Maynard Jackson, when Maynard Jackson became the first African-American mayor of the city of Atlanta, how graciously Sam Massell took that loss but continued to work in the city of Atlanta.
Phil, he made his mark, that's for sure.
He did make a mark. In fact, when I came to Atlanta, I had my office was at Tower Place in Buckhead, and my parking spot was right next to Sam Massell. So he was one of the first people that I got to see, and he was a bridge builder. I mean, we love to talk politics. He would reach out to anybody, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, black, white, and he was interesting. He had a lot of stories. All of us could tell some stories. So he was a true bridge builder, and he listened, and he had his own opinions.
And he was always available to the media for interviews,
right.
So that says a lot. All right, thanks, guys. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Melita, we'll start with you this week.
Thank you. Well, my winners are 2 Andys. Andy Young for the wonderful, frank, and funny discussion he gave at the Carter Presidential Library, the first in-person book event they had since COVID. And the video is available on the Carter Library Facebook page and their YouTube channel. And it's really funny and it's worth watching, and it'll take your mind off other news. And then Andy Stanley of the North Point Community Church delivered a very powerfully blunt message when he was chaplain on Crossover Day, and it's well worth watching.
About unity.
Yes, about unity.
Really
if you
not divisiveness.
Right.
If you need an enemy in order to lead, you're not a leader. My losers are raccoons and possums, who are going to be hunted year-round. And I'm not a big fan of raccoons, but their bones make nice earrings.
Oh, I might have to agree with you on that.
Martha.
Oh, Lord, I don't know how to follow that. I think Mayor Andre Dickens had been listening to Phil Kent, and he went to the APD this past week and made that speech that he needed to make, and I'm going to make him a winner this week because hopefully he'll follow up what he said, but he was tough, he was strong. And then my other winner is the whole debate over cannabis, because we're going to put some structure in that, and I would like to really ask our two senators, we need to start really doing the kind of research on marijuana that we should do so that doctors will know as this progresses how to use it. So hopefully our two senators will do that.
Good point. Theron.
I agree with you, Martha, that definitely Mayor Dickens is a winner this week, what he did around public safety. Phil and I are going to have a winner together, Justice Michael Boggs, who's a guy who watches the show. I'm still waiting for us to play golf together, Justice, but definitely he's going to be named as the new Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court. And then lastly, Congressman Hank Johnson introduced legislation, a bill to prohibit forced arbitration clauses in employment contracts, including language that keeps employees from bringing class action lawsuits against companies. And so this is a bill that is moving through the House this week. And also MARTA Chairman Collie Greenwood, who went to Washington this week to testify about public funding for infrastructure and really pointed out some really interesting projects that MARTA is going to be working on.
All right, Phil, we got about a minute.
Right. Well, winners, I'll have to go along with Andy Young and, of course, Sam Massell. He was a great leader. And yes, the new Supreme Court Justice of the state of Georgia, Mike Boggs, it was just 8 years ago when Barack Obama, of all people, appointed this conservative for a federal judgeship. The left went crazy. He didn't get the judgeship, but I think this is great vindication for Michael Boggs. It was a unanimous vote by his colleagues.
All right, we'll leave it there, but I do have to say Freddie Freeman. I mean, even though he's leaving us, and it's painful to watch him go to LA, he gave us a lot of great times and good stories and good memories.
And I would kind of love for Deshaun Watson to come to the A.
All right.
So
We
just want to
would
put that out
too
there.
in Gainesville.
Yeah,
Make it a good one. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.